Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And in Washington, D.C., the big news was a speech that was made in Iowa by President Trump. It was made Wednesday evening. He traveled to Iowa, gave two separate addresses, one to more of an agricultural specific crowd where he talked about things like agricultural technology and the improvements thereof, and then a larger speech to a bigger audience, bore a little bit more resemblance to some of his campaign speeches. Looked a little bit more familiar to those.
Campaign rally.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
But Phil, specifically speaking to some of his agricultural remarks, we saw a lot of generalities and some things that are, generally supportive of things that a lot of agriculture is pushing for.
Right. Well, this was Technology Week at the White House, and this was a big part of this, going out to Iowa, to Cedar Rapids, and specifically Kirkwood Community College, which is really has one of the largest ag programs for any community college in the country. And one of the things they do there is they have a precision ag program that trains workers to be able to go out there and advise farmers, help them with technology and their combines and so forth, maintain that, help and train them on it. And that's what he went out there to see. He watched a combine simulator in action, and then later he spoke and talked about the innovation that's going on in agriculture. Said things have never looked better in U.S. agriculture.
And in kind of his bigger, broader speech, he did bring up agriculture in that address as well, specifically the renewable fuel standard and ethanol. He said he's very supportive. He said the ethanol industry is under siege and he wants to prevent that. Also spoke favorably of eliminating the estate tax, or the death tax, as many folks call it, but was a little skeptical about whether or not he thought that could actually be accomplished.
Yes, he was, a little surprisingly so. He usually is not that to hedge things that way, but he very much did so, as if he didn't expect the estate tax repeal to happen. The other thing I should point out, back in before the rally, in his remarks at Kirkwood College, he talked about rural broadband, and it was very clear that rural broadband is going to be part of his infrastructure, this $1 trillion infrastructure initiative that they're promising to roll out. And that's significant. It's got the president out there saying that this is important. This is going to be a part of it. There's still some big unanswered questions in terms of how much public funding, how much federal funding is going to be put in that versus what's going to be required from the private sector. And then, of course, there are other questions with expanding rural broadband. One, and just figuring out where exactly the areas that are underserved are. There's been a lot of questions about the kind of mapping that's used, where they seem to show that an area has broadband service when it really doesn't, or it's in one small part of a county and not in the rest.
And we should also note that Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue was in attendance for that speech, flew there after having a trilateral meeting with ag leaders from Canada and Mexico in Perdue's native Georgia. So he was able to make that trip and fly back to Washington on Air Force One for some other business. And speaking of some things that are going on in Washington, Phil has had some reporting done in Agri-Pulse Daybreak here recently regarding spending budget for FY18 and how that might impact agriculture, and some folks that are going to be cheering for full and robust financial support of agriculture might not exactly like what you've been seeing.
Yeah, well, this is a first step. Congress needs to do a budget, what we call a budget resolution. It's a blueprint for fiscal 2018. This is important in part because they want to do tax reform, tax cuts through the budget, what we call the budget reconciliation process, the budget process. So they need to get this budget to resolution going. They're hard at work in the House, strictly behind scenes, but they're talking about $150 billion in cuts to mandatory spending programs. And mandatory spending programs includes Medicare, Social Security, programs like that, but it also includes Farm Bill programs, includes the commodity programs, includes crop insurance, includes food stamps. Pretty sure they're going to probably go after food stamps with some cuts. What we don't know is how large a cut. Broadly, they're going to ask the House Agriculture Committee to do. The chairman of that committee, Mike Conaway, is pushing back very hard. There was talk. There was one number that was thrown out from the budget committee was $50 billion in farm programs. You can't do a farm bill really with that kind of cut. It would mean going after commodity programs, crop insurance. Politically speaking, it would be very, very difficult to do. He's pushing back hard against that. Stay tuned. We're following that.
Because we've seen Chairman Conaway fight back against cuts to crop insurance before, but those are to the tune of, I believe, $3 or $6 billion very early in his tenure as chairman. But there's a big difference between 3 and 50.
Yeah.
Big difference in there.
That was a number that was sort of eye-popping number. But we'll see. He's pushing back hard against it. And this is a starting place. Over on the Senate side, Agriculture Committee Chairman Pat Roberts, he's talked to the House Budget Committee Chairman and weighed in on that. And he's also weighed in with the Senate Budget Committee Chairman Mike Enzi, urging both of them to leave farm programs alone. So we'll see. This is just the first step in a process,
right?
But it's a very, very important step.
Yeah, still very early in the process of figuring out what the funding picture looks like for FY18. But another thing that's going to be impactful in the 2018 fiscal year, or at least parts of it, is what the Environmental Protection Agency decides to do in regards to the renewable fuel standard. Now, those that have been following this program for a while know that they need to have some kind of volume obligations finalized by November 30th of this year for 2018. Typically in previous years, and there's a whole other rabbit's nest we don't need to get into about the timing of RFS announcements, but we have seen announcements in the late May to early June timeframe in the last couple of years of the Obama administration. Here we are coming, rounding turn 3 and 4 into the end of June, and we still don't know what the Environmental Protection Agency is looking to do in terms of renewable volume obligations for 2018 and for 2019 with biomass-based diesel. Again, President Trump has been very supportive. He is said to have received commitments of support from Scott Pruitt before he named him as EPA administrator, but a lot of folks anxiously awaiting to see when those RVOs are going to be announced. Our luck, they were probably announced during the course of us recording this video, but a lot of folks kind of wondering when those RVOs are going to be rolled out, because that's really the Trump administration's first chance to signal where they're going to stand in regards to RFS and ethanol policy.
Yeah, whether they're going to push those numbers higher or keep them closer to what the refiners would like to see.
Yeah, key number to watch there is the conventional or the overall renewable volume obligation. If that's above 15 billion gallons, that's a very good thing for the ethanol industry. I don't know if anyone's expecting to push over 15 billion, but they're looking to maintain that statutory 15 billion gallons that's called for in the legislation that created the RFS. So aside from the cellulosic and the biodiesel and everything else, all of those other obligations, a big number to watch is whether or not the EPA sets that volume at 15 billion gallons, and we'll be keeping an eye on that as to when the EPA will roll out those volumes for the next year. Certainly would anticipate that's going to happen at some point in time here in the near future, but we'll be sure to keep you apprised of when that happens and all of the commentary that follows along with that, and all the other issues that we follow here at Agri-Pulse.com. But I think that's going to do it for the news and events of this week. So for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.